How does one keep a factual narrative of memory alive in the face of possible distortion, forgetfulness, or both? That is a question that was thrown up this week when a new-look Jallianwala Bagh Memorial was inaugurated by Prime Minister Modi and dedicated to the nation. In 2019, when the Jallianwala Bagh massacre completed 100 years, the Union government announced its revamp at an estimated cost of 20 crore rupees. However, as photos and videos of the new made-over Jallianwala Bagh went viral on social media, there was a stunned and shocked response from historians, writers, opposition leaders, locals, people in India and abroad, especially at the changed entry and exit, the image that you're seeing on your screens right now, the narrow entrance, the original entrance of the Jallianwala Bagh from where General Dyer entered before ordering this massacre has now been adorned with sculptures. Historians say this new memorial is a distortion of history of the site where British troops massacred Indians on the 13th of April, 1990. Tonight on We the People, we're asking, how does one build a memorial that is peaceful, a place of somber reflection, a befitting tribute to those who perished, but also an attraction to a generation that has increasingly perhaps no connection with the past or immediate connection with the past or our freedom movement? Well, joining us on the show today from London, Kishwar Desai, author of the Jallianwala Bagh 1919, The Real Story, Professor Chaman Lal, retired professor, Jawaharlal Nehru University, advisor to the Bhagat Singh Archives and Resource Centre, the Delhi Archives, Professor Kim A. Wagner, professor of Global and Imperial History at the Queen's Mary University in London. He's also the author of Amritsar 1919, An Empire of Fear and the Making of a Massacre. We have Anita Anand, also the winner of the Penn Hessel Tiltman Prize of 2020 for her book, The Patient Assassin, that also deals with the Jallianwala Bagh, and Geeta Bhatt, political analyst with pro-BJP leanings. But Kishwar Desai, first to you. You have written an open letter to the Prime Minister. You have, in your past, you were part of that trust created to build that partition museum in Amritsar. You had set up a Jallianwala Bagh Centenary Commemoration Committee. You'd been collecting material, research material on the Jallianwala Bagh. You were initially pleased to hear, as many were, that this historic site was going to be restored. As you have said somewhere, it had been neglected. It had become a picnic place littered with packets of chips. And I remember it like that. Definitely when I visited, I think 5 years ago, that it needed some renovation. But you are disappointed. Why?
Thank you, Sarah. To begin with, let me also clarify that not only had we campaigned very vigorously for the renovation of Jallianwala Bagh through the exhibitions and so on, we had also collected a lot of material, historical material from India and abroad, and we had in fact shared it with the agency that has now done the renovation or restoration at Jallianwala Bagh. And so we were actually looking forward to the day when it would open, thinking that this would be very different to what it was in the past. Secondly, let me also clarify that I do believe that Mr. Narendra Modi does want to remember forgotten heroes, and I do appreciate that as well. But at the same time, now when I have seen the photographs, I have not yet visited the Bagh, but what has worried me is that this is not the stark and somber, reflective memorial that we had hoped for. Initially, we had pointed out that it was a picnic spot, a beautiful lawn had been created, a park, etc. This Bagh was never like that. It was all barren land. It was undulating, stark, barren land into which these men had entered. And incidentally, this particular gully was also like that. It was also very rustic, almost had a rural look. It was not this fancy sort of entry point in any shape or form. Yes, it had changed over the years, just like the rest of the Bagh had changed. But our hope and dream was that they would take it back. You know, Sarah, there are two things that happen when you look at a memorial like this. You can restore it, and simultaneously you can renovate it. I'm afraid that they have got that a little mixed up, because the historical parts of it should have been restored to the original, And the renovation which was needed was for the museum side of it, where we had shared our material, because that needed upgradation. So yes, and I also have written about this, that the figurines or the sculptures or whatever you may call it on the mural on these walls are all historically also incorrect, because Amritsar had been under siege for 3 days before the massacre took place. And in no way was this a jolly crowd or just a bunch of people going to celebrate Baisakhi. They were going for a political meeting, and hardly any women were present. Certainly no girl children were present, because we have done an extensive research on the body count, on the corpses, and so we know all that. So Sarah, yes, I am very heartbroken, and that's why I am appealing to the Prime Minister that please do try and see that those places in the Bagh which can be restored, not renovated, may please be done so.
So you're saying the issue here is not just the fact that this is no longer a place of somber reflection, there's also a distortion of fact, that historically it is inaccurate, right? Professor Kim A. Wagner, you tweeted that history has become history. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's ostensibly a place to commemorate a historical event. But we can see that the makeover it has received now really presents a kind of chest-thumping nationalist celebration. You see it very clearly in the light show, which is accompanied by this bombastic music, and it's projected directly onto the memorial itself. It's hardly very respectful. Of course, you have to look after and renovate historical sites, and you also have to give some consideration in terms of user-friendliness. But the situation we've ended up with now is you can't tell whether you're entering an amusement park or the site of one of the worst atrocities in the history of the British Empire, and of course a watershed moment in Indian history itself. And I think it's also quite clear that Modi and the BJP, they have effectively tried to overwrite what was formerly a memorial site which had been set up by Congress in 1961. But that also erases the prehistory, since this is arguably the oldest memorial site to the Indian freedom struggle. It was established in 1920 as a memorial park by local residents, including the Mukherjee family, who have been looking after the Bagh for 3 generations, who are now presumably out of the picture, and also Gandhi as well, who set up Jallianwala Bagh in 1920 as what he described as a national tombstone. And so this past seems to have sort of been thrown by the wayside in the attempt to give it an uplift and effectively tell a different kind of celebratory narrative.
Interesting. But Professor Chamanlal, this was carried out by the Archaeological Survey of India, the ASI.
Who has done it? If things are done badly, they are called badly. They cannot be said to Archaeological Survey. They have not performed their duty well. But I would say, let me see, point to 2, 3 things. Number one, this was a private land. There was no Bagh there. Bagh is a misnomer. And people used to come to Golden Temple, sit here. There was a well, they could take water from there and take rest. And their political meetings were held. There is Jallianwala, prior to throughout freedom struggle, there were meetings. Now, this meeting place, as Kishore Desai has already told you, this is number one. Actually, even the earlier monument, now, it was the first monument created by Parliament in free India. Jallianwala Bagh Monument Act. In 51, the act was passed, and it took 10 years to create it. In that 10 years, now President Ravindra Prasad, in presence of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and Punjab Chief Minister Pratap Singh Kairo, it was inaugurated on 13th April 1961. There were certain changes in the first building also, because even the street, the narrow path, that has also been created, but in a somber way, with red bricks and all that. And in between pylon, that memorial park, that has also been built to pay people to pay their homage. Now, what has been required? It was required only and only restoration. Not the least. Actually, I understand that there's certain building nearby which were acquired. Now, in this part of the garden, or whatever called it was called actually Jallianwala. The man was Himmat Singh. This was land. He was from Jallianwala village. It used to get folk Jallianwala. Now, in that part, there should not have been done anything beyond that. In other buildings they have created, they could have created museums and other things. But even in museums, etc., there has been very much distortion. There are two heroes related to Jallianwala incident. One is Udham Singh,
Yes.
who shot that Michael O'Dwyer, the
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor of Punjab. Now, Udham Singh's statue doesn't match his face. It's a total distortion. I have sent many real photographs of Udham Singh. Nowhere statues match with real face of Udham Singh. Same is Bhagat Singh, because Bhagat Singh was Udham Singh's hero, and Bhagat Singh has taken, blood-soiled sand of.
So, Professor Lal, what you're saying is the issue is not just we've glorified or glamorized this area, which some may say perhaps is necessary to bring in tourists. But you're saying factually
it's not
it is.
place for tourists. It's not.
You're saying it's factually. I agree
it
that.
It is only place for visitors, not tourists. Tourists is a very, very objectionable word.
No.
It been created as a tourism spot. It's not a tourism spot. It's
Professor, some may argue that, you visit the Golden Temple. After that, you also take out time to see the Jallianwala Bagh Memorial, because our youth need to know about their history and how do we make history interesting for them. But the bigger problem, what you're saying, sir, is that the history has to be factual. So you're pointing out there are, the reality is there are only four genuine pictures of Bhagat Singh that are available. So you're saying however this has been made, even the resemblance to Udham Singh and to Bhagat Singh is not correct. That is very, very worrying. Geeta Bhatt, the charges here, okay, fine, you want to clean up, you want to spruce up, some may go as far as saying you want to, Disneyfy the whole place, but should there not be a focus on things like documentation, maybe an interpretation center? If foreigners are visiting, are there those translation the earphones, etc., those pieces that you see in international museums the world over, or if you go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., or in Germany. Do we see all of that? Does this include all of that?
Well, Sarab, I have not visited it since it has been renovated, but
most of us haven't, ma'am.
It must have been a part of it, because in India also there are many historical forts where translations and the historical importance, the audio, tour guides are available. So I'm sure it must have been available here also. But unfortunately, this change which, the renovation that has been done at Jallianwala Bagh, there has been a political twist which has been given to it. We see there are many political party leaders who are also, jumping into this controversy and trying to criticize this changeover, where the Archaeological Survey of India was very much involved in doing this, doing this renovation. And there have been some changes which have been made for a better crowd management in terms of the entry and the exit, and certain other modifications have been made up. A pond, a lotus pond, has been in front of the Smarak, has been added, and the Khuni Khu, the martyr's well, that has been put. A glass sheet has been put over.
But could you respond about the factual inaccuracies? Kishwar Desai points out that there weren't women or children. Historically, studies have shown that there weren't any women or children present. But you see this new mural on the wall shows women, children all laughing, going in as if they're going in to celebrate Baisakhi.
Sarah, let me intervene a bit. There were children and there were women. Actually, let me clarify.
Sorry, Geeta, 1 second.
Ram Singh's book, Punjab's Contribution to Freedom Struggle, the figures are given of 406 people. There were 207 Hindus 196, including 2 women, and there were 80 Muslims. And the people who died there.
No, Professor Lal, I agree. That is exactly what Kishwar Desai said. 2 women, historically.
Girl children. There were no girl children.
There were no girl children.
There
2
were
women,
boys there.
Professor Lal,
There were
amongst
2 women,
400
2
people, really, that's not the kind of the representation we're seeing in the murals. We're wasting time here, Professor Lal. I just want to stick to the point of the factual inaccuracies, Geeta Bhatt, before I go across to Anita Anand.
No, for example, there is about the light and sound show. It is not that earlier there was no light and sound show. There used to be a light and sound show earlier also, and it was in Mr. Amitabh Bachchan's voice. It may have been, that the presentation might have changed now. And some people, as far as the aesthetics go, it may differ. Some people might like it the way it is being done right now, and some people might not like it the way it has been done right now. But
we need to present the facts. Professor
Yes,
Kim Wagner, you pointed out, you talked about that light and sound show. You say it's like this bombastic, ode to patriotism, but it needs to be based in factual accuracy. Is that what you're saying?
Obviously, but we also have to recognize that historical memorials, they are first and foremost political sites. So it's almost inevitable that there will be some kind of patriotic narrative attached
and of course,
to it.
interestingly, just a second, Professor, I'm sure you followed this. You know that the Punjab Chief Minister, he's been quoted as saying he actually thinks it's quite nice. So that's the irony. So even the opposition divided on this. Sorry, go ahead.
It has become politicized very, very quickly, which just goes to show that in many ways this is not about what happened on the 13th of April 1919. And it has everything to do with Indian politics in 2021. And perhaps that's what some people appreciate. As a historian, I am upset about the disruption of a historical site and the way that it has become victim to modern politics.
Anita Anand, your book, The Patient Assassin, based on the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, won the Penn Hessel Tillman History Prize. Congratulations for that. You, of course, are personally connected to this history. But the judge, you're also a journalist, the judges said about this year's winner that they wanted a book packed with historical rigor, a book that was a rich base of research, a genuine historical classic. That's what they said about your book. Congratulations. That's huge, a huge achievement in today's world. When you hear of this controversy, of course, you also haven't seen, none of us have, because we've all been under lockdown. We haven't traveled and seen it ourselves. How does this make you feel? Because your interest in this massacre is not just historical, it's also personal.
Sure. Okay. So just to state for those who don't know, my grandfather was there on the day of the massacre. That is the personal connection of which you speak. I've listened to everybody, and the one thing I would say is that anybody who thinks that to make this more dramatic, you need light, sound, and cartoon characters on the entrance, really grossly underestimates the public. Do you not think that just to tell people what happened for 10 sustained minutes, that a man walked into a garden where people had very little chance of escaping and fired and fired and fired and redirected guns to fire and fire and fire and fire, is that not dramatic enough for you? Tell the history. Tell the story properly. People will come if you tell the story properly. People are not silly. They don't come for a ride. If they want to go to a fun fair, they will seek out a fun fair. But if they want to go to a place of remembrance, keep the entrance as narrow as it was. Show how difficult it was for anyone to get out that day. At the moment, you're in a situation where many people in India think the person who Udham Singh killed was a man called Reginald O'Dwyer. They conflate these two men, who are very separate men, into one composite Rakshas. You want to sort out history, start with that. Start by telling people the true stories. They are entirely dramatic enough for anybody's appetite, I would suggest. And you don't need to Disneyfy this place. You need a place of quiet reflection, and you need to tell them the facts. So, all my learned historian colleagues who've spoken today, absolutely right. Tell the story as it was, tell the story correctly, people will come. But also, pick up the litter. We've all been complaining about the state that the Bagh has been in. I know Kim has been many times, I've been many times there. Treat the place with respect. If it's getting dirty and it's getting mucked up and the doors are falling off the hinges, sort it out. But to take this step, to turn it into some kind of amusement park, to me, it actually feels a little heartbreaking. So I haven't been there, but what I've seen, it breaks my heart.
So, are you worried now that you'll have young teenagers, etc., showing up to take selfies or, coming there for an Instagram shoot, like we've seen sometimes abroad?
We had, so in this country, there was at the same time, sort of 100 years before, there was a commemoration of all of the people who died in the First World War. And there was a great display of poppies tumbling from a tower in the Tower of London. And each poppy represented one of the lives that had been lost in the First World War. It was really poignant. It was very beautiful. The young who wanted to go and take Instagram pictures could go and do that. The young will do what the young will do. And not all of them are interested in Insta. Many people went there and were deeply moved by the sheer weight and loss of life that was symbolized by something that was temporary and then removed. So, you want to make a point, make the point in a tasteful way. This to me, with light and dhamaka and like some kind of Bollywood shoot, I don't understand why you need it. I don't understand why it's there. I don't understand why so much money was put into that rather than a restoration or some kind of information center where people can learn about what actually happened in that garden. To me, this is entirely baffling. And yes, I haven't been there. I will go. I'm slightly dreading going, but I will go and see it.
Kishwar Desai, Anita, I think, made an important point that struck out to me. She said those who want to go to remember, to have a somber memorial will go. But not everybody wants to go. Not everybody is expecting that. They may go to Amritsar. Shouldn't it be a place that attracts everyone, even if that's not what they're interested in? And hopefully they can come across, have a serendipitous moment where they come away learning something. So what would you say to those that we need to attract our youth who are, in our third generation, disconnected or away, moved away from our freedom movement?
Sarah, I just want to point out one thing because, we are operating at the Partition Museum very close to Jallianwala Bagh. It is exactly a 5-minute walk. So we have had a lot of chance to go to Jallianwala Bagh before the renovation began. We actually mapped the entire area. We did a house-to-house survey to check on people's memories. What did they remember? This is a site of conscience. This is a site of immense agony and pain. When I was writing my book, there was not a single day that I did not cry thinking about those people who lost so much. And I also want to say that even before the renovation took place, people used to go there and bow their heads. It was a place they used to matha teko, literally, and lakhs used to come. There was absolutely, actually speaking, if you ask me, the crowds did not need to be attracted. The crowds used to come anyway. Jallianwala Bagh is part of our history, part of our freedom struggle. But what we were requesting for was not to attract tourists. There was actually no need for that. If you look at the figures, lakhs of people used to come every day, even previously. What we were looking for was actually a place where people could go and see the Bagh as it used to be 100 years ago, to imagine the immense sacrifice of the people who gathered there. So, and also, I do want to point out that even at that time when the Bagh had been restored and the garden level had been raised, do you know, Sarah, a lot of the bullets, actually you had to peer pretty low into the ground to see the bullet marks because
they were being shot from a height.
Yes, and by the leveling of the Bagh, each time they do it, more of the bullets sort of go underground. So it's not as though there was not an attempt even earlier. Yes, a park had been created, but we had high hopes. We had hoped that this time the restoration would be of a different nature.
And you're heartbroken now. Well, we're completely out of time. Thank you all for joining us. The question, of course, is can we learn from hard truths without it needing to be softened and beautified? How can memorial museums open up opportunities for critical understanding of our history, of our violent pasts? All of that, much to think about tonight. Thank you all for joining us with your time and your stories.